What happens when Hollywood royalty walks into the cold, clinical arena of hard-hitting journalism? What happens when a carefully polished narrative collides, head-on, with the quiet, relentless machinery of fact-checking? Sometimes, it only takes 39 seconds. 39 seconds for a smile to falter. 39 seconds for a temperature shift no thermostat can explain. 39 seconds for a routine interview to become something far more explosive. The studio lights inside 60 Minutes always burn a little hotter than expected. It's intentional. The brightness eliminates shadows. No corners to hide in. No soft filters. Just clarity. That night, the air felt unusually still, as if even the ventilation system understood something significant was about to unfold. Across from each other sat two figures accustomed to commanding rooms. On one side, Anderson Cooper, silver hair immaculate under the lights, posture upright but relaxed, hands resting loosely atop a neat stack of notes. His expression carried the same calm neutrality that had defined interviews with presidents, war correspondents, disaster survivors, and heads of state. His voice, when he spoke, rarely rose. It didn't need to. On the other side, Meghan Markle, poised, elegant in navy, shoulders squared, chin lifted just slightly. Her smile was practiced, symmetrical, media-trained. She had navigated red carpets, royal balconies, global headlines. She knew cameras. Cameras loved her. At least, they usually did. The red recording light blinked on. A producer's voice floated faintly from behind the monitors. "We're live in 5, 4, 3, silence." Cooper leaned forward a fraction, just enough to signal engagement. "Thank you for being here." Meghan inclined her head, smile steady. "Thank you for having me." For a moment, it felt ordinary. Professional. Polished. But there was something different in Cooper's tone when he continued. "I think it's important we start with some of the public statements you've made about your time in the royal family." The word important lingered in the air. Meghan's smile held, but tightened at the corners. "Of course," she said smoothly. "People deserve to hear the truth." A slight nod from Cooper. "The truth is exactly what I'd like to discuss." The first subtle shift happened there. Behind the cameras, a sound technician adjusted his headset. A camera operator leaned a little closer into his lens. Nobody spoke. But everyone felt it. Cooper glanced briefly at his notes, not hurriedly, not dramatically. Just deliberate. "In a previous interview, you mentioned that you and Prince Harry were married 3 days before the public ceremony." He looked back up. But the Archbishop later clarified that what occurred was a private exchange of vows, not a legal marriage. The official marriage happened at the ceremony. A pause. Meghan's shoulders moved almost imperceptibly. A breath drawn a touch deeper. "That's semantics, Anderson," she replied. Her voice was calm, but firmer now. Cooper didn't blink. "It's not semantics when something is presented as fact to millions of viewers. Accuracy matters." There it was. The first hairline fracture. Meghan shifted slightly in her chair. Her posture remained straight, but the effortless ease from moments ago had evaporated. "Are you calling me a liar?" she asked. Her tone wasn't explosive. Not yet. But the temperature had dropped a few degrees. "I'm asking for clarification," Cooper said evenly. His voice did not sharpen. It did not rise. It remained maddeningly steady. "And there are timeline inconsistencies people are trying to understand." Behind the cameras, a producer glanced toward Meghan's publicist, seated off to the side. The publicist's jaw tightened. Meghan's smile disappeared entirely now. "I don't believe there have been inconsistencies," she said. The words were measured, but something flickered behind her eyes. Annoyance? Surprise? Calculation? Cooper continued. "You also mentioned that your son was denied security. Royal protocol indicates that great-grandchildren who aren't direct heirs don't automatically receive security detail. That wasn't unique to your family. A faint flush crept up Meghan's neck. You don't understand what it's like, she said, cutting in. You're right, Cooper replied calmly. I don't. But I understand documentation. The crew felt that one. Documentation. It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't aggressive. It was worse. It was factual. The air in the studio grew heavy, almost dense. Even the hum of equipment seemed louder. Meghan's fingers interlocked tightly in her lap. Her knuckles had turned pale. You've spoken about your passport being taken, Cooper continued. Yet travel records show multiple international trips during that period. Can you help us reconcile that? There it was. 39 seconds. That's how long it took from the first question to the moment her composure visibly cracked. Her jaw set. This is becoming hostile, she said. Behind the cameras, someone shifted uncomfortably. These are fair questions, Cooper responded. You came here to tell your story. I'm asking you to provide context. The word context seemed to echo. Meghan leaned forward now, abandoning the perfectly balanced posture she had begun with. The public has been fed lies, she said sharply. By tabloids. By an institution that protects itself. That may be true, Cooper acknowledged. A beat. But that doesn't mean every statement you've made has been accurate either. Silence. A long, suffocating silence. You could almost hear the heartbeat of the room. Meghan blinked slowly. Once. Twice. You think you're very clever, she said quietly. Her voice had changed. It carried steel now. Cooper remained still. What agenda would that be? To discredit me, she answered immediately. To side with the establishment. I'm not siding with anyone, he replied. I'm asking you to substantiate claims. The word substantiate landed like a stone in water. The ripples were immediate. Her foot began tapping, just slightly, beneath the chair. Behind the cameras, her publicist leaned forward in her seat. The studio lights felt harsher now. Less flattering. Less warm. Meghan's voice rose a fraction. I came here in good faith. And we invited you for an interview, Cooper said. An interview includes questions. The tension was no longer subtle. It was tangible. The crew exchanged quick glances. A camera operator swallowed. Then Cooper moved to another topic, the wedding planning. You've described it as joyous, he said carefully. But also as torturous. Staff members have alleged difficult behavior during that time. Emails exist. Documented exchanges. He looked directly at her. What's your response? Her eyes flashed. Those people were paid, she said. They're protecting an institution that protects abusers. The word abusers hung in the air like smoke. That's a serious allegation, Cooper said. Do you have evidence? I don't need evidence, she shot back. I know how they operate. In journalism, he said softly, we do need evidence. There it was again. That calm tone. That refusal to escalate. And somehow, that calmness was gasoline. Meghan leaned back abruptly, crossing her arms now, a posture that hadn't existed 10 minutes ago. This is an ambush, she said. No, Cooper replied. This is accountability. Behind the lens, a producer's heart pounded. The interview had shifted from control to combustible. Meghan's composure was unraveling thread by thread. You're gaslighting me, she said suddenly, turning toward one of the cameras. On national television. The accusation sliced through the room. Cooper blinked once. No. One is conspiring against you, he said. We fact-check every guest. The publicist stood halfway from her seat. Meghan's breathing had grown audible through her mic. "Please sit down," Cooper said as she began to rise slightly from her chair. "Oh, we're finished," she declared. And that's when everyone realized. This wasn't a difficult interview. This was about to become something far bigger. Because walking out of 60 Minutes wasn't just dramatic. It was historic. Her hand moved toward the microphone pack clipped discreetly at her waist. Feedback crackled faintly. A producer mouthed, "Don't." Cooper remained seated. Calm. Unmoving. Watching. "You invited me under false pretenses," Meghan said. "We invited you for journalism," Cooper replied. The word journalism felt heavier than ever. Her publicist stepped onto the edge of the set. "We need a break." "We agreed to a full hour," Cooper answered without raising his voice. The temperature in the room had changed entirely. It was no longer warm. It was electric. And Meghan's fingers were now gripping the microphone wire. Just before she yanked it free, the sound tech's eyes widened. Because if she pulled, the entire interview would detonate in front of millions. And in that suspended, breathless second, no one knew which way it would go. Her hand tightened. The cord stretched. And the cameras kept rolling. The microphone screeched. A violent burst of feedback ripped through the studio speakers as Meghan Markle yanked the pack from her waist. The sharp, metallic shriek cut through the air like shattered glass, and for a split second, everyone in the room flinched, camera operators, producers, even the interns frozen near the back wall. The red recording light never blinked off. Across from her, Anderson Cooper did not move. Not a flinch. Not a defensive gesture. Not even a sigh. He simply watched. The stillness of his composure contrasted violently with the chaos that had just erupted. "This is ridiculous," Meghan said, her voice trembling, not weak, but charged. "Electric. You want to know what's legitimate? The way I've been treated. The lies told about me. That's what's legitimate." Her chest rose and fell faster now. The polished cadence she had begun the interview with was gone. This was raw, but not the kind she had planned to show. Cooper folded his hands loosely in his lap. "And those are serious allegations," he said calmly. "Which is why they deserve to be examined carefully." Carefully. The word struck harder than if he'd shouted. Behind the monitors, the executive producer whispered, "Don't cut. Don't cut." A junior producer hovered near the switchboard, fingers trembling over buttons she didn't dare press. Meghan stepped fully out of her chair now, heels clicking sharply against the studio floor. The echo seemed louder than it should have been. "You're trying to trap me," she accused. "No," Cooper replied evenly. "I'm trying to understand you." The simplicity of that sentence hung in the air like a spotlight. But something had shifted irreversibly. Meghan's publicist rushed closer onto the set, voice lowered but urgent. "We need to pause. This wasn't the tone we agreed to." Cooper turned his head slightly toward her. His expression remained neutral. "The tone is determined by the questions and the answers," he said. "Nothing more. Nothing more." Meghan laughed, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. "You think this is neutral?" she demanded. "You think this is fair?" Behind the lens, a cameraman swallowed. He'd filmed tense interviews before. Politicians cornered. CEOs pressed. But this was different. This felt personal. "I've been respectful," Cooper said. "If asking for clarification feels like an attack, that's not something I control." Her eyes flashed. "You're gaslighting me," she snapped again, pointing toward him. "On national television." The word landed heavy. Gaslighting. A modern accusation with nuclear weight. Cooper's brow lifted slightly, not defensive, but analytical. "I'm asking you about statements you made publicly," he said. "You chose to make them. I'm asking you to stand by them. There was a long, suffocating pause. The kind that stretches time. Meghan's breathing filled the silence. She looked toward the nearest camera, instinctively aware of where her audience lived. Is everyone seeing this? She said. This is exactly what I escaped. The line sounded rehearsed, almost cinematic. But something about it didn't land the way she expected. Because Cooper didn't interrupt. Didn't counter emotionally. He simply waited. And waiting, in that moment, was devastating. Let's talk about the passport, he said after the silence stretched too long to ignore. You've described having it taken away. Travel records show multiple international trips during that time. Were you physically prevented from accessing it? A precise question. A narrow question. A question that required a clear answer. Meghan hesitated. It was brief, barely perceptible, but on camera, hesitation can feel enormous. You don't understand institutional control, she said finally. That may be true, Cooper replied. But I understand documentation. Again. Documentation. The word echoed like a gavel. Behind the scenes, someone whispered, "Oh my God." Meghan turned sharply toward her publicist. This is an ambush, she insisted. We weren't told it would be like this. Her publicist's lips parted, but she didn't speak. Because the truth was visible in the footage. The questions had been measured. Calm. Grounded in public record. There had been no shouting. Only scrutiny. And scrutiny, it seemed, was the real antagonist tonight. Meghan turned back toward Cooper. You think you're protecting journalism, she said coldly. But you're protecting the establishment. I'm protecting accuracy, he replied. The temperature in the room felt glacial now. A bead of sweat rolled down the temple of a lighting technician. The atmosphere had shifted from tense to historic. Because guests didn't walk out of 60 Minutes. Not like this. You're afraid, Meghan continued. Afraid of powerful women who speak their minds. Cooper's voice softened, not weak, but steady. I've interviewed powerful women my entire career. I've also asked them difficult questions. Accountability doesn't discriminate. Her jaw tightened. Liar. The word sliced. Several crew members exchanged glances. Cooper didn't react. I would ask these questions of anyone, he said quietly. There was something about that quietness. It wasn't confrontational. It wasn't emotional. It was firm. Unyielding. And suddenly, for the first time, Meghan looked unsure. Not defeated. Not exposed. But recalculating. Because the strategy that had worked in other interviews, emotion, moral framing, redirecting blame, wasn't destabilizing him. He wasn't taking the bait. He wasn't escalating. He was anchoring. You're a disgrace to journalism, she said, voice shaking now, anger mixed with something else. Frustration? Panic? The cameras have been rolling the entire time, Cooper replied. People will see exactly what happened. That sentence changed everything. Because it meant there would be no editing spin. No selective cuts. Just reality. And reality can be brutal. Meghan grabbed her purse from the side table. We're done, she declared. We still have 40 minutes scheduled, Cooper said. Then you answer them yourself, she shot back. Because I'm finished. The finality in her voice reverberated. She turned sharply toward the exit. Heels striking the floor. Fast. Decisive. The studio door swung open. A rush of cooler hallway air spilled into the overheated set. And just before she crossed the threshold, she turned back. Her face flushed. Eyes blazing. When people see what you've done tonight, she said, they'll know exactly who you are. Cooper stood now. Not aggressively. Not triumphantly. Just upright. They will, he said. And she left. The door shut. The echo lingered. For a moment, nobody moved. No one spoke. It was the kind of silence that only happens when history shifts slightly on its axis. A production assistant whispered, "Did that just happen?" Cooper looked toward the main camera. "Tell me you got all of that." The cameraman nodded slowly. "Every second." Cooper exhaled, not relief, not stress, simply acknowledgement. "Good," he said. Because what had just occurred wasn't chaos. It was revelation. Behind the glass control room, phones were already lighting up. Executives. Legal. PR. The machine had awakened. Her publicist reappeared briefly in the doorway. "We expect that footage to be deleted," she said sharply. Cooper met her gaze. She signed the release. A beat. "It's not being deleted." The door closed again. The reality settled in. This wasn't just a tense interview. This was going to dominate headlines. Social media would fracture instantly. Supporters and critics dividing into digital armies. Think pieces. Legal speculation. Endless commentary loops. But in the center of it all was one unedited truth: a journalist had asked for clarification. A guest had walked out. And that visual, the empty chair across from Anderson Cooper, would become symbolic. The senior producer approached him quietly. "Are you sure we air it?" Cooper didn't hesitate. "Yes." Her team was already crafting a statement in the hallway. Words like hostile, unsafe, biased. But the footage told its own story. And in journalism, footage is gravity. As the editing team began scrubbing through the raw feed, they noticed something chilling. She had never actually answered a single question. Not the marriage timeline. Not the security protocol. Not the passport contradiction. Not one. Every question had been redirected. Reframed. Personalized. Attacked. Cooper watched the playback silently. "You see it?" he asked the editor. "The moment she realizes the narrative won't be accepted without proof." The editor nodded. She pivoted to emotion. And when emotion didn't work, Cooper added quietly, she pivoted to accusation. The control room screens replayed the walkout again. Heels. Door. Silence. Outside, her car door slammed shut. Inside, the newsroom was already bracing. Because when this aired, it wouldn't just be an interview. It would be a collision. And collisions leave debris. The executive producer turned toward Cooper. "This changes things." He nodded slightly. "Yes," he said. "It does." And as the countdown clock ticked toward broadcast time, one question hung heavier than all the others. How would the world react when narrative met footage? When accusation met evidence? When emotion met documentation? The red light blinked again. They were about to find out. The red light blinked on again inside the studio of 60 Minutes, but this time something was different. The chair across from Anderson Cooper was empty. Not metaphorically empty. Physically empty. The navy cushion still slightly indented where Meghan Markle had been sitting just minutes earlier. A faint reflection of the studio lights shimmered across the polished floor where her heels had struck in sharp, echoing steps. The air still carried the residue of confrontation, like static after lightning. Behind the cameras, no one spoke above a whisper. Phones buzzed relentlessly. Text messages stacked on screens. Executives from the network. Legal advisors. Public relations teams. Everyone understood one thing: what had just happened was bigger than an interview. It was a moment. Cooper adjusted his cufflinks slowly, deliberately. His face was calm, but his eyes held the weight of what was unfolding. He had conducted thousands of interviews, with presidents, warlords, whistleblowers, survivors. He had seen people break down, lash out, confess, deny. But this felt different. Because this wasn't about a slip of the tongue. This was about scrutiny meeting resistance, and resistance imploding. A producer leaned close. Her team is threatening legal action. Cooper nodded once. On what grounds? They're claiming you created a hostile environment. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Not amusement, recognition. The cameras were rolling, he said quietly. Every second. In the control room, editors were replaying the footage. The moment her smile tightened. The shift in her posture. The subtle tremor in her voice when the word documentation was repeated. The way she stood abruptly. The sharp feedback when the microphone was ripped free. It was all there. Unedited. Unfiltered. Unavoidable. Outside the building, Meghan sat in the back of a dark SUV, the city light streaking past the window. Her reflection flickered against the glass, poised but unsettled. Her phone was pressed tightly to her ear. Bury it, she was saying. I don't care how. Call whoever you need to call. Her publicist's voice crackled through the speaker. Calm. Measured. Meghan, we can't bury footage from a signed interview. It doesn't work like that. They ambushed me. No, the publicist said carefully. They asked questions. There was a long silence on the line. They questioned my integrity, Meghan replied. They questioned inconsistencies. The distinction felt microscopic, but on national television, it was everything. Back in the studio, Cooper returned to his chair. The empty chair across from him seemed louder than any argument. He looked into the primary camera lens. And for the first time that evening, he spoke directly to the audience. We invited Meghan Markle here tonight to discuss public statements she has made regarding her time in the royal family. We asked questions based on documented timelines and publicly available records. As you witnessed, she chose to leave before the interview concluded. He paused. We will air the footage in full. No commentary. No editorializing. Just fact. The power of that decision rippled outward immediately. Social media ignited within seconds of the teaser airing. Clips circulated. Hashtags trended globally. Some called it an unfair ambush. Others called it overdue accountability. Commentators filled panels across networks dissecting every second. But one image dominated everything, the empty chair. Inside the editing suite, the senior editor turned to Cooper. She never answered a single question, he said quietly. Cooper exhaled slowly. No, he replied. She didn't. And that was the revelation. Not the shouting. Not the accusations. Not even the walkout. The revelation was the absence of answers. The marriage timeline remained unclear. The security claim remained unsubstantiated. The passport contradiction unresolved. Each question floated in the air, unanswered, like doors left deliberately closed. Outside, the SUV slowed at a red light. Meghan stared forward, jaw clenched. Her publicist's earlier words replayed in her mind. He was professional. The questions were expected. You escalated it. She pushed the thoughts away. He had an agenda, she muttered to herself. But doubt is quiet. And doubt had entered the car with her. Back at the network, legal advisors confirmed what Cooper already knew. The release had been signed. The interview had been conducted within ethical standards. There was no raised voice from him. No personal attack. Only follow-ups. The footage would air. And when it did, the response was seismic. Living rooms across the country fell silent as viewers watched the interaction unfold in real time. The calm tone of Cooper. The measured pace of his questions. The visible shift in Meghan's demeanor. The repeated redirection. The escalation. The walkout. Some viewers leaned forward in their seats. Others shook their heads. But everyone felt the tension. Because the footage didn't shout. It didn't accuse. It simply showed. And sometimes showing is more powerful than arguing. In the newsroom the next morning, analysts were already debating what it meant. Was it too aggressive? One asked. Another shook his head. He asked for clarification. That's journalism. A third leaned back in his chair. The real story isn't that she left. It's why she left. That question echoed everywhere. Why walk out? Why not answer? Why not correct the record? In the days that followed, statements were released. Accusations of bias. Claims of hostility. Words like unsafe and targeted circulated widely. But the footage remained unchanged. Calm questions. Escalating reactions. An empty chair. Anderson Cooper returned to his desk at the network the next week as if nothing had happened. No victory lap. No defensive press tour. When asked about it briefly by a colleague, he shrugged slightly. I asked questions, he said. That's my job. But privately, he understood something deeper had occurred. The modern media environment rewards emotion. Outrage. Victimhood. Certainty. But journalism, at its core, is slower. Quieter. It demands evidence. It demands precision. It demands that powerful people, no matter how sympathetic, withstand scrutiny. That night had been a collision between two worlds. Narrative and documentation. Feeling and fact. Control and accountability. And accountability, when resisted, can feel like attack. The empty chair eventually became symbolic far beyond the studio. Editorial cartoons depicted it. Think pieces referenced it. Commentators used it as shorthand for what happens when public figures face unscripted questioning. Months later, a journalism professor would play that clip in a classroom. Watch carefully, she told her students. Notice what wasn't answered. Because that was the lesson. The unanswered question spoke louder than any argument. Back in her private residence, Meghan watched segments of the broadcast alone. The walkout. The accusation. The door closing behind her. For a moment, her expression flickered, not anger this time, but something closer to reflection. She muted the television. The silence that followed felt eerily similar to the silence in that studio after she left. Sometimes silence is powerful. Sometimes it's revealing. Inside the now familiar studio of 60 Minutes, the chair had been reset for the next guest. Perfectly aligned. Cushion fluffed. Lights adjusted. Business moved on. But something about that night lingered. Because the truth is rarely explosive. It's steady. Measured. Persistent. And when confronted with it, people have a choice. Answer. Or walk away. That empty chair had delivered its verdict without speaking a single word. It didn't shout. It didn't accuse. It simply existed. A physical reminder that accountability cannot be silenced by volume, only by answers. And in the end, that was the real climax. Not the raised voices. Not the legal threats. Not the headlines. But the quiet power of questions left hanging in the air. Questions that still echo. If you found this breakdown gripping, if you believe in journalism that asks difficult questions and stories that reveal more in silence than in shouting, make sure you like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments below, subscribe for more deep cinematic investigations, and share this story with someone who believes the truth deserves the spotlight. Because sometimes the loudest moment in television history is an empty chair.